Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us here for our weekly news update. It's always a pleasure and a privilege for us to get together on these amazing updates. We need these updates every week, folks. We got to have them, and we've got to stay on top of what's going on in the earth. Amen. And for those of you that are brand new here, we have our website, remnantwatch.com. That's remnantwatch.com, just for all of you who want to keep track of the things that we're going over. Maybe want to look at some of those news stories that we've covered. And we've got this great search bar right here for you. So you can go back in time. That's right. You can go back in time. You can time travel back to previous episodes and catch up on what's been going on, because I want to tell you, we feel like we're going through a time warp every day. We feel like we're going through, I don't even know what we're seeing. Some of the things we're looking at, we're going, what in the world is going on? How many of you have felt like that as you're looking at the news, you're looking at things going on around the world, wondering, have we gone into some very crazy times? Well, the answer is yes. And the Bible tells us about these days and warns us that they would be difficult days. Oh, forgot to mention that on the top of Remnant Watch, right up here at the top, you'll always see a banner that indicates the latest weekly news updates. If you're clicking on that right now, it would take you right here. So you'd find us. See how easy that would be? So just bookmark remnantwatch.com. And that way, you want to catch us real quick, you just hit that top banner and bang! Every Yom Shani, every Monday night, you're going to hook up with us here at the Weekly News Update, the 10,000-foot view where we get to sit up in the heavens and laugh at the plans of men with our Father in heaven. Yeah, that's what we're doing most of the time, is we're laughing at the plans of men sitting up in the heavens. You will notice that over here you see a emblem for the Alliance of Remnant Ministries, and we are certainly grateful for the alliance. And on that note, let's get into the news. And tonight's top story, a lot going on right now, folks, and the economic rumblings that are going on, the various things that are happening right now. Don't let them fool you. Don't let them distract you with the shell game, because this is all about the money. And don't forget that, right? Trump and Elon Musk plan to visit Fort Knox. How many of you have heard about this? Well, you may not realize what this is really all about, but this is a slow walk to a new system. And they're going to make sure no one, quote, stole the U.S. gold. Well, this ought to be interesting, as the Treasury Secretary Scott Bassett has tried to throw cold water on the idea that gold from the Kentucky military installation might be missing. All right, well, let's go take a look at it, and let's go make sure it's actually gold. Look at this, guys. I mean, I don't know. It's looking kind of rough back there. Looking a little rough. We might want to drill into it and check and make sure it's not tungsten covered in gold, right? Despite assurances made last week by Treasury Secretary Scott Bassett that all of the U.S. gold reserves kept at Fort Knox military installations are present and accounted for, President Trump continues to insist that he and Elon Musk will soon travel to Kentucky to make sure the gold bars haven't been stolen. We're going to open the doors. I'm going to see what gold we have there. We want to find out. Did anybody steal the gold in Fort Knox? Trump said in a speech last week to the Republican Governors Association. And during his remarks at the Conservative Political Action Committee on Saturday, Trump said that he and his senior advisor, Elon Musk, would pay a visit to the heavily guarded military installation about 40 miles south of Louisville, and went so far as to speculate about what might happen when the door to the vault is opened. Anybody getting one of those Geraldo feelings? Like, Geraldo. Remember when he thought for sure he was going to find, like, I don't know, like Al Capone's vault or something. Remember that? And he got everybody excited. Just about ruined his career. Remember that? Well, this kind of feels a little bit like that too. Almost to the opposite. Because I think that you're going to find out that, in fact, it doesn't matter if the gold is there. Let me explain. Allow me to explain, folks. You see, even if all the gold is there, and even if Scott remembers, and even if it's all there, all present and accounted for, all 24 karat gold, all beautiful, all wonderful, all awesome, that's great. Now, even though it's right now currently valued at $40 an ounce, which is laughable, which is what they put it in there at, right? So even if they revalue it, folks, okay, at present prices today, like today's spot price of gold, even if they revalue it, you still only have $3 trillion. That may sound like a lot, except, the market cap of just Microsoft is $3 trillion. So where is the money that is supposed to be running throughout this entirety of the economy? Where is it? So they invented money, and it's all about to come out as we all come to understand. So you got to get a little bit of an education on how this fraud was pulled on you. And you've got people right now defending and saying we need to hang on to our Illuminati witchcraft marked up, okay, fiat fake debt note. They got people actually defending it. Talk about Stockholm syndrome. It is really, truly an amazing thing to watch, the Stockholm syndrome. Now, if you're my generation or older, you're sitting here going, light a fire on this thing. We watched this monster come in and destroy value, homes, and everything else. So I say go knock the door down. Let's find out what's behind door number one. And so that was a very interesting piece of information. I want to make sure you know about that before we go on with the distractions. Because how many know there were a whole bunch of distractions this week? Okay. And so before we go off to the distractions, I want you to be aware that this has massive implications to your world, your actual world. Because once they make the revaluation based on the actual value of gold today against the US dollar, instead of it being 40 to 1, it's 2,900 to 1. That's going to change your valuation of the USD and in effect give you your Jubilee. So we're going to watch with great interest because after all, just tomorrow night, we will hear from the president directly at a joint address of Congress, and it is required attendance, folks. That's a newbie. I haven't seen that one before, so I took note of that. And so let's get into the rest of the news that happened, but I just want you to be aware that big things are happening economically. It looks like we're shifting systems. You know that Twitter switched to X. Many think that's an alluding to the future monetary system, which may include some coins. And as a matter of fact, we just heard that the president did establish the strategic reserve, crypto reserve, essentially digital asset reserve. And of course, XRP, along with a few others, was included in that. And so many people are watching this with great interest, wondering what's really going on here. And I think we're about to find out. But in the meantime, we've got a few distractions we need to cover. And of course, many of you heard this. Trump, Vance, and Zelensky were in the Oval Office. And of course, they had a nice little spat. Wasn't that great? Just drew everybody's attention away from the Epstein list and from P. Diddy and from, Fort Knox Gold and everything else. Let's go ahead and have a fight in the Oval Office. What a great idea. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem, Trump said. He's trying to, Zelensky was in there trying to tell everybody what they were going to feel. President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Ukraine President. Is he the president? Because he suspended the election. So I don't know. What is he now? He's just like interregnum dictator. I don't know what he is. President Vladimir Zelensky sparred during their meeting at the White House to end the Russia-Ukraine war. At one point, Vance asked Zelensky if he said thank you once this entire meeting. And during Zelensky's visit to the White House, Vance said a path to securing peace between Russia and Ukraine was through U.S. engaging in diplomacy. Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come to the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media, Vance told Zelensky. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for bringing it to this country. And as a matter of fact, that's exactly correct. He had come a little too soon. I think Trump's assessment, he's not ready yet for peace. No, he's still looking for ways to mitigate this. And it looks to me like some of this might have been planned. So again, a lot of this is theatrical, folks. And so, of course, right away, the responses that you start to see, and Elon Musk, of course, is throwing his support behind the withdrawal from NATO and the UN, which frankly, makes a lot of sense. President Donald Trump's close confidant and billionaire backer Elon Musk has supported a call for the U.S. to withdraw from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the United Nations. And of course, these organizations continue to draw us into conflict. In a post on Saturday night, Musk endorsed a suggestion from X. Essentially, what it looks like to me is he's ending this arrangement. It's time to leave NATO and the UN. So what essentially he's doing, what the president is doing, and using Musk to say certain things, is he's declaring an end, just like when he walked in front of the Queen, guys. Remember that? When he walked in front of the Queen, which was declaring the end of the supremacy of Great Britain over the United States, and it was no longer going to be its vassal state. Well, I think in the same way, he's also letting them know that he's no longer going to respond whenever they get themselves into trouble. And the United States is cutting off the military support, the attack dog program that they've been basically playing for quite some time, if you hadn't noticed, as part of a deal, assumedly to support and encourage the corporation that was the United States. That having been decimated by the presidency of Donald Trump, you're now looking at the limitations of that which is allowed in the republic. So he's restricted by the Constitution. This is why he can only use tariffs. You guys are going to start figuring this out here pretty soon. So you have to look at that original document to understand what he's trying to do. We'll see if he's successful, but he certainly is trying. And so all of a sudden, Zelensky found himself well received among the Europeans. Isn't that interesting, right? So maybe this move was entirely just to swing public opinion, to create a smokescreen, to create a problem here, which would then give him favor here. Okay, so go have a fight here and then come over here. And the latest, Britain is hosting a summit of European leaders to shore up support for Zelensky. Britain is hosting a summit of European leaders to shore up support for Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky after an astonishing Oval Office blowout with President Donald Trump. So they're trying to dump Trump while they're also going to back Zelensky with further military action. So Britain is hosting a summit, and now they're looking at support, except that what's interesting is one of their generals said, we couldn't send 20 tanks. 20,000 troops, we couldn't send 20 tanks. I'm not kidding. One of their generals said that. Said, how are we going to send 20,000 troops? We couldn't even send 20 tanks. We don't have 25 working tanks, he said, something to that effect. So now all of a sudden Europe is going to be facing what it calls its nightmare. According to the Financial Post, Europe's nightmares here, they have to fight Putin without the U.S. Time for you guys to stand up. The Oval Office blow up between Zelensky and Trump laid bare for many Europeans that something critical is broken in their relationship with Washington. Expecting Washington to always come along and fight your fights while you don't pay for it, right? So this is one of the things that Donald Trump continued to make the point. When the United States lined up alongside Russia and North Korea earlier this week to oppose a UN motion condemning Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, some European officials knew that the transatlantic relationship was in deep trouble. You think? He didn't exactly hide his intentions as he came into office. He made the point that he was going to shut this thing down on day one. Now, I think he got talked out of it. Hear me out, folks. And you're going to see why I think this. Okay? I think that this man is constantly subject to people who want compromise and always want to compromise and always want to, try to play middle of the road. And then he second guesses his instincts. Like he called him a dictator, which he is. And then later on, you saw him walk the comment back because he was trying to make the deal with Zelensky, right? So he goes, oh, I can't believe I actually said that. No, you spoke off the cuff. You spoke correctly. You spoke I forget the word, but he extemporaneously, I forget the word. Anyway, you spoke off the cuff. You spoke honestly. And then later on tried to walk it back, right? Why? Because it was contentious. It was a difficult comment to make, and of course, it was going to cause problems. And I'm sure Zelensky already walked in to the White House with a bit of a chip on his shoulder because he'd been called a dictator. Okay, and in his mind, he's the hero of Ukraine. That's how he's worked this out in his mind. He snorts his coke, and he figures, "I'm a hero. I'm a hero. I am a hero. Extemporaneous. Thank you, Jeffrey." That's the word I was trying to figure out. You figured it out for me. How glorious. Extemporaneous. That's correct. And so he just thought he thinks he's the hero. So, casting him as a villain or casting him as an obstacle, he didn't like that, of course. So this is going to continue to create a problem. But this is why I believe Trump was talked out of shutting it down day one. And why do I believe that? Because look what he did today. Okay. Trump pauses aid to Ukraine after fiery meeting with Zelensky. The move follows a fiery meeting last week between Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and President Donald Trump in the White House, which means that aid has still been going to him from the United States up and until March 3rd when this report was filed. Okay? So Zelensky was actually benefiting from the fact that the Trump administration did not immediately come in and do this. So what Trump did is that he said, oh, okay, since you're going to act like that, I'm going to do what I was supposed to do day one. And now I'm going to do it, day whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? So day, 43 or whatever. The Trump administration is pausing all aid, including weapons in transit or in Poland. So things that he was probably thinking he was getting any minute, now he isn't going to get it all. The pause comes days after a contentious meeting between Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and President Donald Trump in the White House. So he didn't even do it right away. He still waited a couple of days. I don't know if there were some that were saying that he thought he could use the rare earth minerals to shore up our economy and all of that. I'm not buying that. The guy took 150 miles worth of gold out of the Vatican. So I'm waiting for him to show us that. It's probably sitting in Reno or some other place other than Fort Knox. Maybe he's going to punk Fort Knox and then show him the gold he's got. And then this ought to get real interesting. But he's awful smug. And so you don't get that smug unless you got something up your sleeve. So he's got something up his sleeve. Okay. And in the meanwhile, they're selling arms to Israel. They got no problem with that, partner. They got no problem selling arms to that theater of operation. What does that tell you, folks? Okay. So Washington, D.C., the Trump administration has approved a major, nearly $3 billion arms sale to Israel, bypassing a normal congressional review. What? Yeah. He's got Congress, both houses as Republican houses, and he still skips a congressional review. Yeah. So to provide the country with more of the 2,000-pound bombs that it has used in its war against Hamas in Gaza, wouldn't want to slow down those 2,000-pound bombs. In a series of notifications sent to Congress last Friday, the State Department said it had signed off on a sale of more than 35,500 MK-84s and BLU-117 bombs and 4,000 Predator warheads worth $2 billion. And the State Department approved Israel's purchase of Caterpillar D9 bulldozers and related equipment. Why does this matter? Why is this important? How does this relate to Bible prophecy? Folks, we know where this all ends. It ends in a war in the Middle East. And so everything that's going over there is lending to that final conflict. And so that's why it matters that we look at it. It doesn't matter what the excuse is. When we were there in 2015, there was a different excuse. It didn't matter. What did matter, and what I was saying even then, is what matters is all this equipment is now here. All of this war-making equipment has now transited the Atlantic. And as you saw with Syria, they ain't big on bringing it all back. So once they transit it over there, it's because they intend to do battle with it. Not sure if I'm right about that. Well, let's ask the Israelis if they plan on using it. Oh, look at this. They're actually telling you Israel might return to war in 10 days if no agreement is reached. Can you say warmongering? These folks can't wait to go to war. We've been watching this for 2 years now. They itched and itched until they finally got what they wanted. Israeli source, no expectation from Trump envoy Steve Witkoff to visit Israel. Hamas has neither accepted nor rejected the Witkoff proposal. So negotiations over the continued release of hostages held in Gaza have stalled, folks. And sources familiar with details of the talks told the Jerusalem Post on Monday, nothing is currently moving on this front. And so if you're expecting a big move on this, it's not going to happen. I believe that this intransigence is also fulfilling the scripture. Remember how that Father caused Pharaoh's heart to harden, and so that he could then execute his judgments on Egypt. Well, some of you are wondering, why would they do these things? Why is this person doing this? Why is Hamas doing this? You have to take into consideration that Yahuwah is hardening hearts to bring about his final conclusion of all war. Because remember what comes after this last one. This is the one we beat our swords into the plowshares and we say we've had enough of war. And maybe because it's televised, maybe because we all get to see it up close and personal. Maybe, as the scripture says, we get to see, behold with our eyes, the recompense of the wicked. Maybe that is why we finally get to the place where we say we've had enough of war. Maybe then we will finally say there is no good use for a bomb. Okay, and it's already Israel is already engaged. Don't think that they aren't. Israel says it's conducting strikes in southern Syria. The Air Force is now attacking strongly, and this has been now for over a week. Israel confirmed it's conducting strikes in southern Syria as a new Syrian government calls for full withdrawal of Israeli forces from Syrian territory. So this continues to cause a problem because it is a affront against Turkey's authority, and Turkey is a NATO member. And so an ally of America. As a matter of fact, Turkey sent a bunch of eggs over to the United States to help us with our artificial egg shortage. We'll get to that here in a minute. But a lot of the military buildup going on in the Middle East portends of this final conflict, folks. So this is why we bring it up, and this is why we pay attention. This is also why we must continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And Egyptian military buildup in the Sinai is a potential eighth front for Israel's seven-front war. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has often spoken about the seven-front war that Israel's been fighting since Hamas massacre and kidnappings on October 7th. But recently, however, Israeli ambassador in the United States, Yichai later expressed concern about a potential eighth front in the war, the military buildup by the Egyptian military in the Sinai Peninsula. And those of you that have been old enough remember 1967 and 1973. These things can all of a sudden break out. We can all of a sudden be dealing with warfare. It looks like I lost power for a second there. So we can have these conflicts. These things can in fact happen, and we can suddenly be facing them in these situations. And so, folks, this is why it's critical that we take our time and look at the details of these situations as they unfold. Many times, what we're looking at is a recovery effort, recovery of, in this case, it's recovery of this, but many times what we're looking at, what we think is warfare may be attempts to try to bring peace, attempts to try to bring things down a little bit. And many times we're seeing the efforts of forces not favorable, not good forces doing their job, their level best, if you will, to bring war instead of peace. And so some of this is manipulated. This is why we have to be very careful with all of this, because we can get ourselves over our skis, if you will. And I'm gonna switch stories real here because I had a screen go out, so I've got to quickly pop that on. But while I do that, I'm going to put a different story on the screen because this is another story going on here in the United States. I have this queued up, and so I'm going to go ahead and add this, and you guys can take a look at that. This is going on in North Carolina, and North Carolina has, unfortunately, seems like it's been targeted. North Carolina as well as South Carolina, and this is the fires that are going on there that are, of course, devastating the Carolinas right now, which is really tough to watch. But folks, this is the reality of our world. And these fire events, I don't know what you want to call them. I'm going to call them a fire event for lack of a better word at the moment. But They continue to be devastating in our world, and we continue to see more and more fire outbreak. Look at this on a rooftop. I don't see anything else burning around it. So it's starting to get us really concerned. What we're actually seeing, what's actually happening in this time period. I'm not even 100% sure, to be perfectly candid with you. You know why we're suddenly seeing so many of these fires. Some people are speculating that it's because they're going to build other cities. I don't know. Maybe that was a plan. Maybe they got, like somebody said, they got a plan for that. I don't know. There's some speculation, and there may be some truth to that. But nevertheless, that's certainly something for us to continue to pray for, and pray for our neighbors in North and South Carolina. Getting back to this this story over in Israel. Um, Again, the buildup is going on in Egypt, and I believe that some of this is because they're trying to prevent the Palestinians from crossing into Egypt. So I don't think all of it is necessarily, portends a war. However, it could. I mean, after all, just because they're there for one reason doesn't mean it can't change for another. And speaking of borders, we know that the southern border of the United States is now being patrolled and dealt with in a very different manner. And Pentagon has ordered up to 3,000 troops, combat vehicles, and other things to the border. So Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is keeping his promises. He's ordered about 3,000 active duty troops. This isn't reserves, folks. This is active duty to the southern U.S. border, including soldiers from a motorized brigade equipped with 20-ton armored Stryker combat vehicles. Defense officials familiar with the effort said. The Defense Secretary approved the orders Friday, said two officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss internal Defense Department planning. Folks, I think they're about to get more aggressive against the cartels. They plan on assisting the Mexican military with their efforts to rein in the cartels. So this is going to get interesting over a real short period of time here, folks. So hang on to your hats. Those of you that are keeping an eye on the southern border, that's an interesting point. And because it has the potential to break out into conflict, and at a time when the world is reshuffling. Did you guys hear about this? Norway fuel giant refused to fill up the U.S. forces submarine, I believe it was. They refused to fill it up because they didn't want to help the U.S. Navy anymore. Isn't that something? So again, these things are changing. Now they changed their mind. Okay, so this didn't stay that way, folks. But the fact that they did that is changing the situation around the earth. And so now, of course, Ukraine is under attack. Putin unleashed Iskander-M missile attack to sink container ship in Odessa carrying cargo of British weapons for Ukraine. So this just happened yesterday. Vladimir Putin's unleashed a missile strike to sink a cargo ship amid unconfirmed Russian claims it was carrying British weapons for use by Ukraine. And so now that Russia knows that the U.S. is not exactly on friendly terms with President Cocaine, this is starting to change the dynamic. So we're probably going to see a wrap up in a not good way here very shortly. And I don't think Europe has the manpower, the capability. Without a massive escalation, they just don't have the ability to stop the Russian aggression. So it was wise to sit down and find a deal. They didn't do that. Now they've got themselves a problem. Now, remember, guys, we were looking at these stories concerning these airplanes. And I got to tell you, especially in recent days, we are definitely concerned about what we're seeing in the air. And there are more and more things happening going on in the skies. And an interesting thing happened right after this Zelensky event. So this was kind of interesting. NORAD had to scramble jets as 3 civilian planes are caught flying in restricted airspace near Mar-a-Lago. So is this a result of, the FAA just sending planes where they're not supposed to be, or is there something more going on here? Palm Beach today, fly near President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago event. So 3 civilian aircraft violated a temporary flight restriction. And NORAD had to scramble F-16 fighter aircraft to intercept the planes. All 3 aircraft were safely escorted out of the area by NORAD aircraft. So they apparently were not on a suicide mission of any kind, but nevertheless, that is quite interesting that all of a sudden we've got these things going on in the air. And we had quite a few of them. By the way, I do think there's something to this internal sabotage and subterfuge and intrigue and palace intrigue, folks. Crazy things going on. What's happening? What is happening? Look at this. The secret network of federal workers resisting Doge from the inside. The rebels, the rebel forces, government employees fight the Trump administration. Wait a second. Don't they pay you? Okay, hold on. Fight the Trump administration chaos by organizing and publishing information on Blue Sky. After seeing Elon Musk's X post on Saturday afternoon about an email that would soon land in the invoices of 2.3 million federal workers, asking them to list 5 things they did the week before, a clandestine network of employees and contractors at dozens of federal agencies began talking on an encrypted app about how to respond. Hey, folks, how about you just tell them what you did? Like the rest of us do when you have to explain what you do, for your work or your job or anything else. Why not just write back? And I think it's a reasonable thing to ask. As a matter of fact, we're starting to wonder if there may even be people there. So this is going to get more and more interesting as we go, because, of course, there's more and more review going on. And, of course, there's a big gap between the new people coming in and, the new administration and those that were already there, right? Those that were already part of the deep state or the bureaucratic class that are already there. And I think they have emboldened the other side of these negotiations in the case of Ukraine, such that we may, in fact, end up in conflict. Look at Tulsi Gabbard said it on Russia. There's 2 paths, peace or war. So the director of national intelligence, who's just been confirmed, Tulsi Gabbard, said during an interview Sunday that an inflection point is nearing a pursuit of peace or World War III. And I do believe that, as many of you know, there are forces trying desperately to take us, apparently, to World War III. Don't ask me why. I don't think it's a good idea. They think it's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea, but they do. Obviously, they've got some money involved in that, but obviously, this is a very dangerous time. So, folks, we continue to laugh in the heavens at the plans of men, but we also understand how serious these days are, and we remember that there are people in harm's way. So continue to pray for those that are in harm's way to awaken. And speaking again, now we're getting to the South Carolina governor. Sorry about that. Had to switch that around. But he did declare a state of emergency as massive wildfires grow to 1,600 acres. So, folks, all these things are happening at the same time. I don't believe in coincidences. Do you? I don't. And so when I see these kinds of things happening, again, you start putting it together and start wondering, is this a destruction, a demolition of a nation and a way of life? Is that what's really coming to an end? And has the war already begun? And are we just seeing it manifested in different ways? Weather is another way that we're also watching that. Hundreds of weather forecasters fired in latest wave of Doge cuts. So we don't know what's going to be happening there, because, again, the weather forecasters and other National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration employees that were on probationary status were fired. So this is going to be interesting. So we're now not. So get this. Guess how we'll feel the impact of this. The way that this will be felt, just like, oh, you want to fire FAA employees? Gee, I wonder what's going to happen. Okay. Not that you were getting much warning on weather things anyway, but now you even get less. So if you thought you weren't getting enough warnings, you're not going to get, you're going to get even less, because mass firings across National Weather Service ignite fury among scientists worldwide. And they are upset. It's federal job elimination strike. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association or Administration and National Weather Service. And none of these people understand that the country doesn't have the money to pay them. They're going to be leaving this other system. So they don't have $5 trillion a year. You don't have $5 trillion a year coming in from tariffs, which is the only mechanism that is authorized by the Constitution, folks. You guys need to you got to be better readers. Okay. So there's a lot of taxes that have to go away. So he has to figure out how to pay for stuff. And part of what he's doing is reducing the overhead before the switcheroo. So he's got to reduce the overhead. And 1 million employees haven't even responded. We're going to get to that here. So this is why you're going to keep seeing this effort. This isn't going to go away. Sorry, get over it. Trump says Mexico, Canada tariffs will start March 4th. That's tomorrow, plus an additional 10% on China. President Donald Trump said his proposed tariffs on Mexico and Canada will go into effect March 4th. China, which already faces the U.S. tariffs on its products, will be charged an additional 10% tariff on the same date. Trump added in a Truth Social post. These are how he will fund the next government. The announcement appeared to contradict the timeline laid out about an hour earlier on CNBC Squawk Box by White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hansett. The sweeping 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada had been paused on February 3rd for 1 more month, allowing them to negotiate a little bit. But he really couldn't turn it completely off, folks, and I'll tell you why, because this is how he intends to fund the country. But the Trump administration has recently sown confusion about whether they would go back into effect when the delays expired, and of course they would. So you're going to learn about this as we go. You're going to learn the difference between the corporation and the republic. The corporation was doing things differently than the republic is allowed to do. So that's the reason why they created the corporation, because the corporation had freedoms that the republic wouldn't have. So now Donald Trump is running into all those restrictions, those things that were remedied by creating a corporation, and then they could float money in different ways. That ended. And so now he's got to deal with this behemoth of a government that was built on a different system. So that's why you're going to keep seeing things that reflect this reality. Okay. Things like this. Trump orders a 30-day freeze on the use of U.S. government credit cards. Why is he doing that? Well, because he can't afford it. President Trump directed federal agencies on Wednesday to implement a 30-day freeze on the use of government-issued credit cards as part of his latest executive order. The order implements the Department of Government Efficiency's cost efficiency initiative, which is why he did this day one, which aims to ensure that government spending is transparent and government employees are accountable to the American public. Now, if you remember, when he walked in day one, they were trying to get him, they wanted him to run out of money. If you notice, the timing of it was January 21st was when they actually were, quote unquote, out of money. The government was, quote, out of money and would need to write a new deal, write new law. Except now they got a different president they got to get to sign it. And he's got a whole different plan, a whole different agenda. So all of a sudden, you didn't hear anything about this budget deal. The 21st came and went and nobody said anything. And it went on for weeks. And now we start hearing about, oh, they're passing a new budget now all of a sudden. And it was like, wait a minute, wasn't there supposed to be a big discussion literally day one of his administration? And that just suddenly didn't become an issue. Folks, there's more going on here than meets the eye. So he is pulling a maneuver that I believe this is unprecedented. We're living in unprecedented times. So if in fact he pulls this off, you're all going to benefit from it, but it will be painful because you're disconnecting from an old system that we're all used to. And we're going to be moving to a more equitable system, it looks like, but that's going to be painful. So, of course, that's going to mean people are going to complain. Just like when they left Egypt, folks, they complained all the way to the promised land. Remember that? So what do you think people are going to do right now? Even if he's giving them the best, it's still going to be a problem. So either way, you're going to deal with it. And the country's going to go through pain no matter what. Now, getting back to those airplanes, remember I mentioned that Delta plane evacuation, passengers forced to flee on slides, the things we never thought we'd ever see, right? And now we're seeing smoke-filled cabins at Atlanta airport. So they're scaring you about travel, which is really interesting. This is constantly going on. This is too many weeks in a row, folks. I'm sorry, but this is not normal. not going to go too far because I don't want to add too much to it, but there is in fact something happening here. It's just too many stories. Okay. Too many of these are hitting the news. United Airlines flight forced to make emergency landing at Newark. A Boeing 757 carrying 176 passengers. I mean, freak them all out, right? So this is all stuff that's happened just in this last week, guys. How about this FedEx plane? Did you guys hear about that? A FedEx plane catches fire mid-air before making an emergency landing. What? Yeah. A bird strike caused one of its jet engines to catch fire. And so that was what happened there. But you're seeing a lot of these stories. So very, very interesting. Now, how many remember that I mentioned that there was a measles outbreak? Remember we were talking about that? We're like, measles, man, we had that when we were kids, man. In fact, you had the measles, your parents might send you over there, say, go get the measles, get it over with, you know. Right? Mumps, you know, chicken pox, all that stuff, right? And now it makes the news when people get the measles. And so we were talking about that. Well, then this story, thank you, Benjamin Fulford, who somebody caught this. So ABC News was pumping this story, and take a look at this, folks. They're using a Mumbai image from 2022 to push the measles outbreak in Texas in 2025. Whoops. Same widow girl. Okay. And we can see here the date, 12 November 2022 from ABP News Bureau. And then they reuse the image in 2025. So that's why we're not continuing on the measles story in Texas. Because when they start pulling those kinds of things, we got new questions, right? And this is why we take the 10,000 foot view. This is why we sit and watch these things, and we don't get too excited and we don't get too emotional, because that is something that we knew we would see. And that the egg issue is a real issue, folks. This is something that isn't going to go away. And I do know that Turkey did send in a bunch of eggs, but there is a lot going on. This is right here in the West. Not enough eggs. This is affecting the Southwest. So this is back in our part of the world. And if you don't have a hen, if you don't have this, by the way, 50% of the population had chickens up till the 50s. So they really pulled a fast one in the last few generations to get us away from being a little more independent. And so I do believe that you're seeing a lot of things that are setting us up. Feels like a bit of a setup, doesn't it, guys? It feels like we're being kind of maneuvered just a wee bit. I think so. Speaking of maneuvering, this little group defying orders, I would expect them to be disbanded. So this group, the CDC, they appeared to override President Donald Trump's will by taking part in a meeting with the WHO this week. So I would expect there to be a little more shakeups going on. This guy's not a big fan of rogue organizations or rogue agencies. So I would expect to see the CDC to get slapped here the next cycle before long. Hey guys, did you hear about this? The super rich are trying to biohack their way to immortality. Yeah, just in case there are any watching, there's only one way, and that ain't it. Biohacking isn't going to do it. The longevity business is booming for high society. The quest for eternal life has become an expensive hobby. Yep, that's right, folks. They are trying desperately to figure out how to extend their lives. And if you think there's anything they won't try, you are mistaken. That makes our world very dangerous because they have a lot of money and they're weird. They are. They just are. Okay. They just are. And of course, more and more this tightening occurs. This story got out of place, but I want to share it anyway. Elon Musk issues a new order over the Doge ultimatum, and billionaire Elon Musk issued a new order on Saturday over the Department of Government Efficiency's ultimatum, which asked government employees to document in an email what they've done in the last week in terms of their work and why it matters. An order comes. He's basically announcing their threat is a threat of termination. So it's about time. I think this is wisdom. Send federal. Basically, if you don't respond, you could be terminated. Well, the reason why they're doing that is, by the way, trying to figure out if there's actually another person. There's a person with a pulse receiving a paycheck, because I wonder if these bureaucrats didn't figure out how to create fake employees and pay themselves extra paychecks. And if they respond to the email, then they may be called to a meeting where there'll be a head count. So I think that the gig is probably kind of up for some of what these guys have been doing. Because, I mean, look at this. Look at this report, guys. Trump says 1 million federal workers who haven't responded to Doge email may be fired. 1 million didn't respond. 1 million? 1 million people working for the government who just said, I don't feel like it. The president asked you to respond. I don't feel like it. They want their paycheck, though. Can you imagine this, guys? Could you imagine being running your company, and you sent the note out to all your employees saying, hey, you're all fired unless you respond, and only half of them respond? I'd say there's going to be some firings the next day, man. These people are nuts. I don't know what's going on, but that's crazy. And so now we're going to keep seeing these things, guys. We're going to see more and more stuff where they're going to try and continue to frighten you. I'm not going to give it a lot of attention, just so you know. So this is adding to the egg shortage, because you got this kind of nonsense going on, and I'm not going to dignify that with a response. I'm just going to tell you that it's going to keep affecting you. And the prices are going to continue to rise. They're expected to rise this year more than 40%. So, hey, if you're looking for a good investment, eggs are a good investment. eggs are going to be doing well for a while. Apparently, they're going to be at an all-time high. So, a good investment advice: get into the egg business. According to USDA estimate, they're only likely to get more expensive as the year continues. So, hey, if you're in egg production, this is great. If you're not, well, maybe you should get into it because it looks like it's going to be a good business opportunity going forward. Somebody's problem is your opportunity. So let's just make more eggs. And, I happen to know how to do that. It has to do with feed and animals and patience. And lo and behold, we can add to our egg count. So I do think this is a solvable problem, folks. What I think that they're continuing to do is fearmonger, because they want you to feel anxious, and anxiety and anxious people are easy to manipulate. Anxious people are easy to manipulate, and they need to manipulate you to sell you stuff to keep their economy going. And now it's not even going to be people. Now you're going to be, their economy is going to be a humanoid economy. That's right. Silicon Valley is going all in on humanoid robots. You knew that, though, right? Come on, guys. You knew that. Making them a reality will take decades. No, it won't. No, it won't. They're lying. It won't take decades. They'll do that right away. They're already putting them in Amazon. Imagine spending your weekend free of chores. Forget about the laundry, the dishes, tidying up. Doesn't that sound great? It's all been taken care of. And one responsible is an amalgamation of motors, wires, and computer chips, a robot. That is the beginning of idiocracy, folks. Idiocracy. When people don't even have to do their laundry, they don't have to do simple, basic chores. Have you noticed this does not improve society? When you keep taking away things that give people opportunity to develop discipline, good habits, good hygiene, you start taking all of that away, that's not going to improve society. It's going to be the destruction of society. And pretty soon, the only people that are going to be well employed are the people fixing robots. And they're going to be low in number because nobody bothers to go to school to learn robotics. They just bought one. This is crazy talk, and yet it is on its way, full steam. So understand that the world is embracing the AI revolution full tilt. You as believers should know better than to put so much confidence in these things. After all, it's because of that we don't even know when we're talking to a real person, or if they've given us an imposter that's just in a mask because of all this digital stuff. So we're finding out all kinds of things. Speaking of imposters, we've got one here in a battle. This is the one who tried to open portals. Remember that? And what I think of is you play silly games and you win silly prizes. Tried to open portals on all of you. And it did work on some people. So, folks, pay attention. Pope Francis's health suddenly worsens, and that's going to affect people connected to false altars. So, pay attention. And in hospitals, as Vatican issues new update after he is placed on a ventilator. So, he's not doing well. This is what happens when you don't repent. Instead, you double down. And there are many, many people praying for him. It won't work. Judgment is coming for all of this, and it is coming hard, folks. Anything that was built on lies, anything that was built on deception is being judged. It's the time of reconciliation where we look at the books and we look at and that's the day that's coming, right? What comes after the war? Well, the last great war, we get the opening of the books. The king comes, okay? So these things are coming as a result, and the judgments are coming now to wake up the people so that the people say, what is going on here, and start asking harder questions. Here you have Elevation Church. They're firing their youth pastor in Texas because, again, same things keep happening. Same kinds of conduct keeps recurring. So there's a reason for the recurring of the same conduct, and the problem continues because of that. And so I believe we're going to continue to see more and more of these types of headlines. Unfortunately, they are hard to read because when we read these things, we realize that the beast got loose. The Ashereth beast got loose in our country, and this is the fruit of that. And so you can read this story. It was a horrible story. I'm not going to dignify it too much. But unfortunately, we have some young victims, young people being victimized. This is the reason why we need the evangelists in this hour. We need the pastors to rise up in this hour. We need to come back together in the truth and protect the youngest ones of us all. And that is something that I take very seriously. I know many of you in what I call the grandpa brigade, right? You grandpas out there, you grandmas out there are just as dedicated to that as we are. And we're thankful for your support and encouragement because that is necessary in this hour. If there's a group that needs our full attention and protection, if there's a group that needs our full attention and protection, it is our children. Amen. Let's not forget that. Speaking of which, this story was very concerning. It hit right on that very topic. Cleveland area school bus with 15 students burst into flame during the morning route. Have you ever heard of such a thing, folks? I've never heard of this before in my life. So all this stuff happening is just really concerning that it's all happening so much is happening so quickly. The bus was headed to Monticello Middle School, so it was middle schoolers, when the flames erupted. But the driver rushed the students to safety and no one was harmed. Thank you, Yahuwah, that no one was hurt. A Cleveland area school bus transporting 15 students became engulfed in flames during its morning route Thursday, officials said. And, one of the things that I'm really concerned about and have been for decades, actually, is that we are all too comfortable letting our children out of our presence. We're all too comfortable giving them over to people that we don't even know. And how many know there's much regret in certain parts of the world right now because of that? I mean, there's a lot of regret in Eastern Europe. There's regret in Hawaii. There's regret in Brazil. There's regret in all parts of the world. So keep your children close to you. There are just too many predators, okay? Too many dangers, too many issues going on. And we're going to finish up with this story here. And hopefully we do get to the bottom of this, because I believe this is another floodgate that is being held up. And one of the things that you're going to see when you see this story is you're going to see a lot of avoiding who is in fact the bad guy in all of these machinations. But we're going to wrap with that the FBI is finally going to be overturning some of these Jeffrey Epstein documents. According to Pam Bondi, our new attorney general, she says she's demanding that they be turned over. Now she's saying that she was deceived by how many there were. And so she thought that there were only a couple hundred, and is finding out that there were, in fact, thousands. Why does this matter? Because it isn't Jeffrey Epstein, folks, that's the issue. It's who he was feeding the information to. This man was not working for himself. He was too much of a hot mess to be doing much of anything other than what he was being paid by somebody to do. You'll notice they're not mentioning who the somebody or the group is, and they're attempting to avoid it. It won't be avoidable. Eventually, it will become known where this material was all going and where it was being stored. And that's going to change the world scene. As the world realizes who the group is responsible for not only the Epstein crew, but the P. Diddy crew and the Eastern European and the other things that you've all heard about that are absolutely monstrous and disgusting, when you find out who this group is and where they are, you will then understand why they weren't mentioned all this time. And I do believe that it is the crescendo. It is where this all ends, because now that the world is awakening, the people are putting two and two together. They're going, what's going on here? And now the words of Messiah start to make more sense when he said, I will make them who are of the synagogue of Satan, who say they are believers and are not. I will make them to come and worship before thy feet. And so understand that the devil has a group out there. Satan has a group out there, and they are doing wicked things. But I do believe that the light is coming for them. I believe that each one of these are like little strings on a sweater that are little pieces of yarn, that each one unravels the picture just a little bit more. All of you are starting to figure it out. You're starting to read between the stories, not the stories themselves. You're starting to learn to discern what's actually happening and not what they want you to think is happening. This is an important part of news review, and this is why you don't want to allow them to bombard you on a daily basis, because they will make you do something we want to avoid, and that is become anxious. Remember, here at the Weekly News Update, we want to be informed without being overwhelmed. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. I pray this broadcast has been a barakah, a blessing onto all of you wherever you are. Good night.